Hello, and thank you all for joining us here for day 3 of Cornell Sports and Entertainment Week. This is our Networking 101 panel. I'm Alex Jimenez. I'll be moderating today. We have a great panel in store for you, a really great group of panelists. And just to introduce this panel a little bit, in planning this week, we really wanted to focus on students. And I imagine a lot of you in the audience today are students, and this is a panel that many of you were asking for and hoping for to get more information on how to network towards careers in sports and entertainment. So this panel is for you. We encourage you to interrupt us, ask questions, be involved. The more engaged you are, the better this will be for all of us. So please, feel free and comfortable to ask questions and to be engaged and an active participant in this. So with that, I want to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, and we can kick it off with Josephine Martinez.
Sure. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm Josephine Martinez, the Director of Talent Acquisition Projects for the National Football League. Super excited to be on this panel with my co-panelists, and I'm excited to hear from some students today. So thank you.
Thanks, Josephine. Aaron, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. Aaron Klein, Manager Inside Sales with the Chicago Cubs. Really looking forward to answering some questions and giving back. I know I was on a lot of panels like this when I was a student, so glad to be here.
Thanks, Aaron. And Robbie, you want to round out the order?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Robbie Cohen. I work at CA Sports in the brand consulting department. Graduated Cornell ILR in 2013. I've been working at CA for the 7.5 years since then, and looking forward to today's panel.
Thanks, Robbie. And to introduce myself a little bit, I graduated from ILR in 2015, currently the coordinator of Major League Operations with the Red Sox, and have been in that role pretty much since graduating back in 2015. So, I think this group, we have representatives from a lot of different areas of, the sports world, two of us with clubs, but representing different areas, myself in player operations, Aaron on the business side and in sales. Josephine, working for a league, and Robbie from the agency side. So I think we have a lot of different sides of the industry covered. I think the best way to start, though, to get a little bit more information on us is to have each of you tell a story how networking helped you get to this point in your career. I'll leave it up to you who wants to go first, but I think that'll be a topic that can really help our students.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll go first here. So I was working for the Cornell football team, figuring out what path I wanted to go in my career, and was looking to get into the professional sports side. Had targeted a few teams. The Cubs were one of them, and I didn't have an in. I sent letters, I sent emails, I did everything I could, and finally discovered that there was a Cornell football alum, Greg Bladorn, working in the partnerships team. Wasn't the area I was looking to go to, but wanted to make a connection. Got his phone number through one of the staff members with the Cornell football team. Reached out, and I flew to Chicago. Had lunch with him. He helped me get an interview, and 4.5 years later, I'm working for the team. And it was about a month between that first meeting and when I had an interview, and ultimately got a job. And that was just finding a Cornell alum that could vouch for me and help me get through all the red tape.
That's awesome. And I think, that's probably something that's true of a lot of our stories, is how, the Cornell connection really plays a role in helping kind of launch your career. I'll jump in and share my story or my example of, how networking helped me get here. When I was a freshman at ILR, the ILR school had an alumni mentorship program, and Gabe Gershenfeld, who Robbie, I know and maybe the rest of you do as well. Gabe has worked for the Indians, the Dodgers, and at the time he was working for the Indians, and he had just graduated, and I was paired with him, as an alumni mentor. We got to know each other, and obviously my interests, really were in baseball. And he helped me make some connections over with the Indians over a few years, and ultimately that him advocating for me and helping open the door and allowing me to make more connections and relationships with people with that organization. And similar to Aaron, it was on the business side. I wanted to work in player operations. It wasn't my number one immediate goal right off the bat, to work on the business side, but it was an opportunity to get my foot in the door and to learn and to have baseball on my resume, and that that opportunity really opened the doors for the next opportunities that I've got in my career. So I that Cornell connection is one that is definitely important, and it can be used in a lot of ways. I heard on one of the other panels this week that Cornell alums like to help Cornell students because somebody probably helped us. So I think that's something to always keep in mind. Josephine, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I should mention I'm actually a Cornell alum from the MPS program. So Master's in Professional Studies through ILR in New York City. So was in a bit of a different place coming into kind of the ILR family. But I should say one of the, I think, most interesting ways that I kind of made networking work for myself at the beginning of my career was actually I had met a student while I was a student in college. We were doing a program together, and the student actually had just interned for baseball and explained to me that she had this wonderful internship. And I thought that is the coolest thing that I've ever heard. So through peer-to-peer networking, actually, she was able to introduce me to the folks that she had worked with the previous summer. And they took a chance on me, interviewed me for their role. And that's how I really got my start, I would say about 15 years ago. So while it's great to reach out to alums as well, don't ever kind of, forget to also speak to your peers about your hopes and dreams and tell them hopefully where you want to go in the future, because they may be helpful as well.
That's a great point. I think we oftentimes when we think of networking and establishing relationships in whatever industry, whether it's sports and entertainment or otherwise, we think of those who are ahead of us. But more often than not, it's your peers, and it's also sometimes the people who are coming after you, who are maybe not even your peers. And I always think about this, but you never know that the intern candidate that you might help at some point along the way might be the person that hires you for your dream job 20 years from now. So you never really know, and those relationships that you're building and friendships that you're making right now are also really important. But with that, Robbie, do you want to tell us your story?
Yeah, actually, though, before I do, I want to piggyback off that. I think that's very key. Is like I firsthand example where literally I'm talking to this week someone who was a Cornell student at the same time as me, and we've done plenty of deals together over the years where she was on the talent side and I was on the brand side, and we had that relationship because we established it while we're at Cornell and still maintain that. As I mentioned, done multiple deals together. She's in a new role now, and we're connecting to find out how we can do more deals together in her new role. But yeah, my story, I'd say when I was at Cornell, I was in the Sports Business Society, which I imagine a lot of you are. And I was the VP of events. And one of the Skype sessions we had was with the co-head of CA Sports, which, as I mentioned, is where I work now and have worked since I graduated. And I wanted to go the agency route. So while we had a lot of A-list talent doing virtual and in-person speaker sessions, my target was I need to network really strongly with this guy because this is where I want to end up. And I used that to my advantage. I obviously maintained the relationship after that. And about a year and a half later, started as an intern there. And he was an integral part of me landing that internship and is still technically, I guess, my boss, the head of sports to this day. So I definitely started that at Cornell. And I know we'll get into some networking tips later, but maintain throughout. And obviously that's, still paramount to my current job and hopefully future.
That's that's such an awesome story, and I remember so Robbie's a few years older than me at Cornell, but he was the VP of events when I was a freshman, and Robbie was kind of like the rock star for all of us who were younger. He was the one bringing in all the cool speakers and stuff, and then of course goes on and has this great career with CAA. So it's cool to be kind of talking to you now, Robbie, about this stuff and looking back 7 years later. So that's awesome. So, I think we've all kind of touched on this a little bit, but, why is networking? And I want to not just say the word networking, but establishing relationships. I think, oftentimes networking can be portrayed as, oh, you're just trying to, meet somebody with the purpose of getting a job. But I think one of the things that, really shines through in all of our stories to this point is that it's the relationship. It's, sometimes it's not that you got the job right away, but you established a relationship that kind of led to something down the road, and maybe led to more than just a job, but some kind of mentorship. So why is networking and establishing these relationships so important, specifically in the industries of sports and entertainment?
Yeah, happy to jump in on that one. I think it's honestly, it's pretty simple. The sports business is very much, and entertainment business is very much a people person business. So being able to showcase the skills that that you are a people person and can have natural conversations, that people are going to like you, that people are going to look up to you, that people are going to want to connect with you, is so important, because ultimately those are the type of people that you want on your team or as your colleagues. So honestly, it's pretty simple. Like it's really a people's business. It's you're marketing, you're selling, or for the most part, and like you need to be able to show that you can do that on your behalf, and being able, and then when people see that you can do those things, it translates to, okay, I want him or her to be working with or for me, because I can see how they are portraying themselves and how the interpersonal relationship we have is one that I want them to have with our clients, prospective clients, buyers, and whatnot. So I think it's pretty simple. It just demonstrates that you have what it takes, the networking conversations that translate directly to what you're going to ultimately be doing.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off of that, Robbie, I mean, does the networking ever stop? I think we focus a lot on, networking for your first job, right? But what happens next? Is it just networking so that you get in the industry and then you stop? I know in my career it hasn't been. I don't know, Aaron, do you have any thoughts on kind of that perspective?
Yeah, I think there's two things on the team side. You see these big global brands like the Chicago Cubs. We're still very small businesses. We have about 225 full-time office employees, which is pretty small when you compare us to an investment bank or something like that. So in sports, a lot of times your next step is dictated, by potentially moving to a different city and a different team. And so you have to build those relationships, but also, unlike a bank, right? The top 10 investment banks don't hop on a call and strategize together. In sports, that happens. We have monthly calls with inside sales managers throughout pro sports in different organizations and different teams. And we talk about, hey, what are some things your business is doing well? What are new sales campaigns you're going? And you have to build relationships to be comfortable enough to share best practices with other people. And we had some layoffs recently, and I was able to send my team to other organizations, and they got job interviews pretty immediately because they trusted me, and they knew if I vouched for someone on my team, they could trust that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's funny because it's funny to hear, Aaron, you from the, both, also working for a baseball team, but it's so different on the player operations side, right? Where we don't want to share anything with anyone because everything is about competitive advantage. There's technology, there's even just human capital talent, right? That you don't want to lose to other teams because that gives our team an advantage, and so it's really interesting, kind of hearing the difference. Now, that being said, I do think, even on the player side, if we have an intern candidate, for example, that, we're not going to be able to hire, but we really liked, those relationships industry, allow us to, pick up the phone and say, what, we can't hire this person, but, Aaron with the Cubs, or so and so with the Diamondbacks, if you have an opening, you should take this person. And I know we've done that with a lot of people who really stood out. So establishing those relationships, like you said, Aaron, more kind of naturally as part of the flow of the business is really important. Josephine, I want to turn to you. I know you've done a lot of work with diversity and inclusion, and making front offices and the sports industry more diverse. That's a problem with our industry for sure. It is a boys' club in a lot of ways, and there needs to be more diversity. Is there anything you can share for anyone out there who maybe isn't the traditional white male who's trying to take a leap into the sports and entertainment industry, and how they should think about launching their careers?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think, for folks who are in the industry, it's really important that folks remember that, this unfortunately, it is a very small business, or it does seem quite small, and it is a lot about who you know. But I know with the NFL, we have made great strides to make sure that we're actually posting all of our roles through the vice president level. We have publicly gone out and stated that's the case for us. We run a complete search process for all of our open roles. And as any students who are coming up in the sports world, hopefully over the next couple of years, be sure to vocalize that within your organizations as well. Is there anyone that we're missing here? Are we stifling ourselves and not getting the right candidates by picking up the phone and just calling someone that we may know? I know that's a huge culture shift, but I know it's actually done a lot for us to make sure that we're just running clear processes, posting our summer internship positions, running actual, having folks meet with a number of folks before they're coming in the building, and running a true search process. So that's one thing I would say. And then, folks are really looking for diverse talent right now. And if you are diverse talent looking to break into the industry, it's not easy, as Alex kind of said. It's not easy to break into it all for anyone. But there is an eye, and always I think folks are thinking about how do we bring in the best of the best, whether that is from any school, any state, etc. So that's also something to just keep in mind as you all go forward in your careers.
For sure. And I think, all the points you made, Josephine, are so important. The reality is this is hard. It's hard to break into these careers. I think all of us have our own stories about, the challenges and the late nights trying to, find our way. And, but the reality is, there are things you can do that will give yourself a better opportunity to land these careers. And for better or worse, as Josephine mentioned, in reality, all of our companies should be posting every opportunity and making that more accessible to every person, every candidate who might be out there. The reality is we don't, in a lot of cases, it sounds like, from Josephine's experience, the NFL has done a great job, but I think collectively as an industry, we don't see all the candidates. And one thing I talk a lot about is, we see the candidates that network, whether they're really substantive candidates or not. The ones who are comfortable networking, they're on our plate because they've reached out, and for better or worse, we're spending some time on those candidates, right? And we also see the candidates that network that are very substantive, and those are the ones that get jobs. And the candidates that we don't see, and the ones that we really want to see, right, are those that get in front of us somehow, whether it's, through a cold email or, finding a way to connect with us one way or the other. But, if we can't see you, you might be the smartest, most well-prepared, positioned candidate for a job that we have to offer. But if we don't know who you are and you don't get on our radar, we might not be able to offer you that job because we don't know you. So I think, that's a good kind of transition into, I think what the next section or segment of this panel is going to be, which is, well, how do you do this? How do you network? How do you overcome those challenges? I know one of the big challenges for people out there is, just feeling comfortable doing this, right? I mean, there is a certain amount of ego that it takes to say, yeah, I'm going to email, a vice president with a, professional sports franchise and expect that they're going to email me back. And I think getting past that hump of, you should feel comfortable doing that. And there are right ways and wrong ways to do that. But I think that's kind of where we should go next. Robbie, I'll kick it off with you. How should you network? I mean, what are the right ways to do it?
Yeah, that's fair. And I think, to your point, Alex, that having the confidence to do that is paramount. But sending a cold email without any context is probably not the right way to go about it. I mean, I think all of us can speak to the amount of outreach we get, especially in today's market. And plenty of that is just outreach with nothing. We're like, hey, I went to Cornell. Can we speak? Like, I'm sorry, like all of us went to Cornell. There are a lot of us. What else do we have in common? What else do you want to know about me? Or what else do you have to share about yourself? So not just going in with a cold email or a cold LinkedIn request of like, saw you went to Cornell. I would love to hear about your career path. Like, give me a little more. Like, what did you know? What did you notice about my career path that you're wondering? What are you doing at school that made you come across me or Sports Business Society or whatever it is? So I think having the confidence to go in cold, but do it with substance instead of just going in with nothing. And then I think also, if alternatively, if you are able to figure out, okay, who is the mutual connection to Robbie that can help introduce me so that I actually have that to start with. So I'm probably more inclined because A, I want to help you, but B, I also now have to get back to the person who introduced me. So I have to do both of those. So I'm more inclined to want to do that because I also owe it to that person because I know on the other end of that coin, I'm going to ask him or her for a similar favor down the road. So those are just a couple that come to mind immediately for me.
And it's funny because, sorry, Josephine, go ahead.
No, no worries. I was just going to reiterate what Robbie was saying. I know for myself, I went to a small liberal arts college, had pretty much decided I did want to go into kind of the sports field at some point, I think between my junior and senior year. And the alumni team at my college was great for making connections with people. And I think having them kind of vouch when making connections to someone who's now the president at Legends and someone who's now the CMO at baseball, many, many years ago, it really does help on who's making that soft connection for you. And I would also say the other big piece on sustaining some of those relationships is, it's never too late to reconnect with someone or just say thank you for taking the time to speak with you when you were a college kid. So I saw the president of Legends in our office before COVID, can't remember when it was before COVID, but I shot him a note and said, I saw you in the cafeteria briefly today. You were clearly taking a meeting, but just wanted to, let you know that I really appreciated when you spoke to me back in 2008. And I think that goes a long way for folks, and they like to hear about career trajectories as well. So I would just throw those 2 cents in there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Remembering to thank people is huge. Somebody took their time, and as all of you know, our time is valuable, and your time as the person trying to make the connection is valuable. And so, when you have that opportunity to establish that connection and learn from someone, make sure to send a thank you. I know, someone gave me that advice very early on in my career, and actually went so far as to say, if it was really you spent a lot of time with the person or they spent a lot of time with you, send them a written letter. And I did that, and I know it made a big impact on a few people who are, people that I consider mentors in my career now, that they were blown away that I did that. And and the few times that someone does something like that for me after I took a lot of time, it stands out because no one does that. And I think a part of, this process is making yourself, stand out and being different from, in a positive way. You can be different in a negative way. That's not, that's not great. But finding ways to, to differentiate yourself from the pack. And one of the ways to do that is simply just to thank people. I know it goes a long way, and it's something people really appreciate. I'm going to kick it over to Aaron in a second to get his thoughts, but just want to remind everyone, you're more than welcome to, ask questions. We're here. If you have anything you want to, interrupt our flow of thought, we're happy to jump in any direction. So feel free to send in questions. But Aaron, I'll go to you. How do you network? What from your experience and on both sides of the experience, right? You've hired people, and you've also had to get in yourself.
Yeah, it's important that you're networking and see it as a full year process, not just when you're looking for a job. My first outreach going back to Greg was, hey, I'm going to be in the Chicago area, looking to get into pro sports. Would love to connect and buy you lunch and talk through things. Now, I didn't tell him I was flying in Chicago only if he responded and was willing to meet with me. I had family here. We had I think it was President's Day weekend, had some time off, but you have to build a relationship before you're asking for a job, because if that's the first thing you reach out about, you're out of luck, because either I've posted a job and I'm just going to tell you to apply, or I know you're just reaching out to me because you want something from me, and we're happy to help. I probably have 2 to 5 calls every week with people who are maybe college students or in the industry. I think the sports industry as a whole is really good at trying to help people, as long as you're willing to fulfill your end and do things the right way. So, Robbie talked about reaching out with a purpose, following up. People who I've networked with who really stuck out to me are people who would see an article a month later about something the Cubs did and would reach out to me and get my thoughts or my perspective. Especially with everything going on in the sports industry, it's pretty easy to find an article that can simulate a conversation. There's always things going on, especially as we break out of COVID and teams start to do and leagues start to do some unique, exciting things to bring fans back.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Alex, can I riff on that a bit? I think
Yeah.
we talked a lot about the first step, but I think what Aaron brought up, the sending an article about something you've seen, it's not just the first step of, hey, let me have that first call. You have to maintain the relationship, and just checking in, hey, any jobs, like that's not going to help. But saying, hey, I saw this, either something that your organization did, a trend in the industry, like every follow-up should be pointed and have something that's additive to Aaron's point. Like, hey, I noticed, let's say Cubs, I noticed the Cubs are implementing this this analytical philosophy. Are you part of that? What is your take on that? I thought this X and Y, or, I'm on the agency route. Hey, I've seen a trend, or obviously with the pandemic, brands are having a tough time marketing and have to adjust their budgets. How are you advising your brands during this? Has it affected your job? Like, asking genuine questions, sending articles, things like that is going to maintain, instead of just a check-in of like, how's it going, or anything new. Like, you need to have something there that's going to make me want to respond, that's going to generate the conversation, and that's going to make you stand out to me, because you know what, that I'm glad that he or she saw that in the news. I'm glad that he or she is staying up on the trends, that he or she remembered what I do and cares about that, instead of is he helping me get a job. So I think maintaining that is arguably more important than the first step, because it's pretty not easy to get an intro call. I don't want to say that, but it's easier to get the intro call than continue down the path to stay top of mind, especially in today's market, which, no secret that this is a very tough market across any industry, just with, the state of the world, and like being able to stay top of mind, and so that when jobs do come back, we can, four of us or whomever, can say, you know what, that person was a good candidate. I want to get him or her in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Robbie. The amount of people who, I think all of us can probably agree on this, the amount of people who we talk to and then never hear from again is actually pretty high, which you wouldn't think, right? Because, okay, you've made the effort to make this first connection. I think people do struggle to figure out, how do you scale it, right? But for me, the candidates that really stand out are the ones that, yeah, we talked on the phone, and it was a good conversation. And then 6 months down the road, I hear from them, and they might have been asking me advice about, XYZ. What should I do for my summer internship? How do I, I'm interested in working in baseball operations. How do I, take that path? And you give advice. And then when you hear from someone 6 months later, and they said, you know what, we actually listened to that, and this is what we did, and this is where we're at now, and now we have new questions because we've advanced in our career. Or, even I've had students who, were looking for projects, looking for something that they could do to differentiate themselves, which I think is really important, having a work product. And that's something we'll definitely get into at some point on this call, is having a work product and how you could use Cornell to kind of build that experience. One of the things that's a challenge in working in this industry, in these industries, is you need experience to gain experience. So how do you get that? We'll definitely cover that. But I think, having a student or a potential candidate or somebody who's networking with you, talk to you and ask advice about something, and then to scale that work that they were talking to you about, that shows us something. Not only are you reaching back out to us so we know you're engaged, but we also just got to see how you took an idea or a project that you had and you turned it into something else. And now you have a fresh new set of questions to ask us. So now you're a dynamic candidate for us. And you've proven to us, without actually working for us, that you can get things done, which is not true of every candidate or potential candidate that we talk to. So I think that's, really a really important point for me in my career journey, right? When I was a student at Cornell, I used that as motivation to work on things, and if you needed extra motivation, right, that was always it for me. Hey, I had this amazing conversation with, the director of international operations with the Dodgers, or, insert name of, person here who's in the career field that you want to go into, and they gave me advice. Well, now I got to do something with it, because if I want to reach out to them again in 6 months, I better have something to show for it, because I can't just email them and say, hey, like, just want to touch base again. You know, you have to have something to talk about. So I use that as motivation. I think, you should too. I think that's a way to kind of keep yourself on the clock. But I think that's actually a good segue. How can, we have students, probably a majority of students on this panel. How can you use the Cornell experience and the opportunities that you have there to get this much needed, we've all kind of talked about it, substance or experience, and it's hard to actually get that before you break in. So how can you use the Cornell experience to get there?
You got to figure out what you want to do and what the key components of that are. So I think sometimes it's good to just look at job postings and see what they say are some of the skills, what they want. All right, so I'll use sales as an example. There may be some sales classes now. I know there weren't a ton when I was an undergrad, but what is key to sales? It's public speaking. It's being able to convince someone of an idea. So there are certainly pitch competitions that you can do at Cornell. There's a lot of entrepreneurship type of classes, but a debate or public speaking classes. I took negotiation with Professor Lipsky. Those types of classes are really important because you can say, I won this competition. I worked on my ability to win an argument, to convince someone of a point. That translates, and not looking at the end result, which is making a sale. So I think that's something you can do, just breaking down the components of a job and figuring out how you can work on those skills.
Robbie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think, like, to Aaron's example, I know I took like collective bargaining in sports, and we had to do a mock arbitration. Like, I'm not even in that side of the business, but like being able to talk to the fact that I did that in college is awesome, and was awesome when I was looking for a job. And then to Aaron's point, dissect those things. Like, for example, I've said this already, but like marketing, you're always marketing yourself. Yes, the Cornell course in marketing is not how do I market myself, it's general marketing, but all of those marketing tools apply to how you want to market yourself as a candidate. So I think that's important. And then what I was going to say before, I wanted to piggyback off what Aaron said, but just my original thought was, and this is not a shameless plug, I swear, like, be involved. If you're on Cornell campus and you're not involved in the Sports Business Society, like, you should. That's the first thing you should do, in my opinion. It's a no-brainer if you want to get involved in sports business. It's an easy way to start building your alumni network. It's an easy way to meet peers who have ideas, who have connections. It's an easy way to get practical experience, like Alex mentioned, whether it's writing for the blog, magazine, radio, just organizing events. Like, as simple as it sounds, saying, yes, I was the one who was organizing, bringing in our speakers. What does that show to a potential employer? That I know how to network, that I was able to get those people in, that I had the initiative and the organization to be able to take these and make them into events from start to finish, to then also help my fellow colleagues, not just do it myself. So I think, again, not a plug. Like, if you're not involved in that and you still have the opportunity to, you really should. It's a great way to just like start getting involved in the sports industry at the bare minimum.
It's leadership development 101, right? So when we're hiring for entry level, whether that's our internship class or junior rotational program class, we tend to ask folks a lot about their peer relationships and also how they were able to kind of develop their leadership skills on campus. So please do feel free to kind of do that as well.
For sure. And I think, the one thing I'll add, kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Robbie said, in my experience, I helped start Big Red Sports Network, which is a sports media organization on campus. I went into my first job in baseball was not in broadcasting. It was in major league operations and pro scouting. Broadcasting had nothing to do with it, but leading an organization, starting it from scratch, having to manage people. It actually helped me get that job in my first job as our assistant in pro scouting with the Red Sox. I had no experience in scouting, but what was my role as an assistant to a department? It was to help manage our team of scouts and support them in everything that they're trying to do. Being somebody who, had experience supporting and working with a large group of students from a leadership perspective made a huge difference. And so, I think finding ways on campus to join student organizations and get, as close to real world experience as you can is really beneficial. So we had a question come in from Anonymous that was following up on where do you send a written thank you letter to? Do you try to find the person's office address? That would be my recommendation, and I'll let the other panelists chime in if they have any thoughts. But for me, it was you can find out where the headquarters of their office is and send it there, and they'll usually get it one way or the other. It may take longer if they're not based out of the headquarters, but I don't know if anyone, Aaron, Josephine, Robbie, if you have any other thoughts on that.
You can also just ask, right? You can say, hey, I didn't see an address in your signature. Would love to send you a thank you card as a follow-up to our conversation. And I'm sure the person will be more than happy to provide it. And if they don't, you can always PDF a handwritten note if you'd like. So there are a ton of ways to go at it.
Yeah, don't be afraid to be personal. Like, make a joke. Hey, my mom taught me from when I was a little kid, I should always send thank you notes. I know during coronavirus, you might not be working from your office. What's the best place to send a thank you note? Just let them in. Let them know you're a human being. You're okay to make fun of yourself a little bit and have a good time. And people will offer to help. If they're really that afraid to send you their personal home address, they'll just give you their office address and you'll take that.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. And I think I'm going to use this as a good segue into kind of the next question that I'd have, which is you probably shouldn't, without asking them for their home address, send them a letter to their home address if that's not publicly available somewhere. So, that would be one of the don'ts that we would probably have for this group. But I think, we've all experienced, great success stories, people who networked with us that really made a difference, right? And really made an impression on us. And now, we were able to help them, or they did well in their career. We've also had, the stories that, wow, that was really not done the right way. And it really rubbed us the wrong way. So I think, I guess we can start with the positive and then work towards the negative. But, I think it'd be great if each of us can share a story, a positive story where someone, reached out to us, and it doesn't necessarily mean we gave them a job, but they did something that stood out, that made a difference. Aaron, you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's really important when people, come in prepared. We talked about preparing for that outreach, but same thing. Like, I had an awesome call a couple weeks ago where, the student had looked at my LinkedIn, saw my career path, and asked really pointed questions about, what got you from A to B, what made you, earn this promotion, what was a challenge during this sales cycle you did. That's really impactful versus the person who hops on the call and it's just silence because they're expecting you. I don't like the sound of my own voice. I don't want to talk to you and just talk at you for 30 minutes. So if you can come prepared with good questions to ask, I'll talk to you for an hour. It's just really all about what you bring into the conversation.
I will say, I have a mentee. Our relationship started, she was very poignant with trying to get some inside information on how to get into the NFL. I actually am a boomerang employee to the NFL. So I left the sports league for a while. I believe I was working in financial services at the time, and helped her with her job search. But through her job search, she was able to become extremely vulnerable with me about her concerns and we developed a really close relationship. Even to this day, she's since moved on from the sports side. She's now on the agency side and asks me all the time for career advice. And I would say, don't be afraid to, as those relationships progress, become vulnerable as well, because people like to kind of share their advice and build, relationships where they feel like they're maybe in your board of directors, they are, mentoring you very closely. It's very different than networking. So don't be afraid to kind of flex that as well, because as Aaron said, with making a joke about asking for an address, like, no one's a robot. We all understand that people have to be vulnerable as well.
Alex, can I do my good into the bad, as I actually think they're
For sure.
like good parallels or opposites, I guess. So both of these are actually non-Cornell students. Coincidentally, that doesn't factor into it, but the good was the best networking call that I think I ever had when I was in my current role and some student reached out to me. The person was actually a freshman, and they came in. They asked me genuine questions about what I did, how I went down my path. When I started talking about it, they asked follow-up questions like, why did I pivot in that route? And do I look back on it? Do I regret it? Things like that. And then when I finished talking about myself, I wanted to hear about him. And he just impressed me so much with all of the things he's doing on campus. And he was only a freshman. And yeah, I thought it was the best networking call I had from my end. And unfortunately, the only advice I said was, you're only a freshman. I wish I could help you, but you're even early. My only advice is keep doing exactly what you're doing and keep doing calls like these. That way, in a year or two, you will be very well prepared, and I'm going to want to help you. So I thought that was the best. And then on the flip side, because I referenced them asking questions about me and then me asking about him, I connected someone literally this week to a contact of mine, and the contact reached out to me after, said, "Hey, I spoke to whomever, and I just wanted to let you know, like, he didn't ask me any questions about myself. He just basically read me his resume, and I didn't ask him to do that." So, and I'm happy he did. He jumped in and was really honest with the person and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, I was a little surprised you did that." And I had the same conversation with him after. But you should be going to every call prepared to be able to go through your resume, but you shouldn't go in with the goal of going through your resume. You should be able to go in with the goal of taking at least 20 minutes without, if the person doesn't want to, without even touching on yourself, just asking genuine questions about that person and the industry and things like that. And then only talk about yourself, like if it's put back on you, So I thought that was a really good contrast of someone who did it really well and was so impressive even so early on, and then this person who was actually a graduate who I thought could have went the other way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, the people like to talk about themselves. We like to talk about ourselves, so get us talking. And I think, I can't remember for the life of me where I heard this, but someone was giving it, I think it was at another conference, and someone gave the advice of, we're going to remember the people who asked us a lot of questions because we naturally remember the times we got to talk about ourselves a lot. And for better or worse, that's true. No matter how, vain or not vain you are. So I think, engaging with, with people in the industry and getting them to talk about themselves, that will stick with us almost as much, if not as much or more, than if you just recite, and tell us about yourself. You want an ebb and flow. You want a little bit of both, but it's important, as Robbie mentioned, to actually, you're on the call with someone for a reason, take advantage of that. I'll give my stories quickly. One, the positive story was, I had someone who reached out, completely cold email, and they sent a sample arbitration deck on Xander Bogaerts. And as someone who's put those together, I know that that's an absurd amount of work. So, and this person just did this because they wanted to work in baseball and they were interested in arbitration. And it blew me away. So I like immediately got on the phone with that person because I thought they must be insane to have spent the time on this. And it wasn't perfect. I wouldn't have walked into a hearing room with Xander Bogaerts with that deck, but man, that really stood out. I mean, it was, and I got on the phone with him, and we ended up hiring him for a 2-week experience that we needed help with arbitration, and he was great. And he stayed in touch with me over the course of a year and kept checking in. Man, I'm so bought in on the Red Sox. Like, it was so cool to be there for 2 weeks. How are things going? I saw this came out. What did what were you involved with that? How did, curious and insightful questions. And we ended up not having a position for him. The timing of everything didn't line up, but he stayed in touch over a few months. And myself and one of our VPs who had also worked with him we probably called 20 people we knew at 20 teams, and he ended up getting a job with the Diamondbacks and is full time there now, and somebody that I consider a counterpart, and I talk to regularly. It just stood out so much. Like he showed initiative, he got an opportunity, he was great in the opportunity. He continued to stay in touch. I couldn't say no to him. There was no way I was gonna. I went to war for him to get him a job that we didn't have, and then we said, then two of us said we have no choice but to find a way to get this guy a job because he deserved it. And on the the negative stories, unfortunately, there are a lot, but one that I think is just an interesting one because it happened yesterday. I had a student not a Cornell student, but someone reached out to me as I was preparing for this panel, which is ironic. And they, first of all, they started the email with my boss's name. So that's okay. We all have done the copy. I have made this mistake before with the copy paste of an email, but it's not a great look, and it stands out immediately when it's not, they're sending an email to not you, but it's to you. And they went through in this email talking about how they saw in the new, and this is an example of how you can take what we're saying about the something relevant going on with the team and apply it negatively. They said they saw that, so it's in the media now that the Red Sox and the Red Sox ownership group and this other ownership group are considering merging, and Billy Beane is part of this other ownership group. And so the student starts to talk about how he would, he knows it's not official yet, but he'd love to work for Billy Beane. And like, I don't know Billy Beane personally, but I love the people that I work for. And you got to be really careful because you don't know what the dynamics of that situation are. And because it was like jarring to me. I was like, this, in this case, it's not necessarily accurate, but when there's transition in a front office, it can be a really stressful time for people. So like making that leap was really difficult for me to read, even though it really didn't matter so much in this case, it was jarring. And I said, I have to tell that story when we do this panel, because it was a great example of kind of taking the right tools, but applying them incorrectly or in a way that could be harmful. So Aaron and Josephine, I don't know if you have stories that you'd like to share that are on the negative side. We also have a lot of questions coming in that I'd love to get to. But if you have any quick stories you'd want to share on the negative perspective, by all means.
I will just say, and I know we've touched on this before, but networking is important. Robbie shared an example of a student early in their career. I think it is really great to network freshman, sophomore year before you need an internship, so that you're asking the right questions about what the culture is like where someone works. You're asking questions about all the right things. But sometimes it just does come across, if there was a posting that came out the day before or a week before, it comes across as a bit opportunistic when someone has just happened to network with you when there's a posting. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think we've covered it well. I'd love to get to some of these Q&As.
Great. So I'm going to start. There's a question here from Isabel, and I'm going to paraphrase some of these. But the question is, basically, she's Isabella's class of 2020. Do you guys have any advice on things to do right now? Obviously, with the pandemic, there are so many challenges, both in finding jobs, but also in finding, the little opportunities that can, even on campus, that can, make a difference for you. So are there any thoughts on courses, resources, programs while searching for jobs during the pandemic? And in her case, she says she doesn't have experience in media or entertainment and sports. So how can you build that experience in a time like this?
Yeah, Alex, you just touched on one with the mock arbitration. I'm not saying everyone here should go do that, because that seems like a crazy amount of work. But what are little things you can do that you can come to a first or second or whatever round of networking with hey, I put this together in case it's helpful, or just out of personal interest, not saying do something with it, just like, this is what I did and this is what I'm learning. So I think things like that. I also think if there are ways to learn skills like PowerPoint, Excel, like if you can take online or I guess I would say online for safety purposes courses on those, like most people use those in their jobs. Like I took courses on that and Cornell, while I was a student, were hugely helpful. If you haven't taken those, that's a good thing and relatively easy thing to do during this time. And then before turning it over, the one thing I want to say to the end of that question, Alex, is I wouldn't worry if you don't have media or entertainment experience. Like, yes, sports marketing is sports marketing, but realistically, we're doing marketing or sales or whatever aspect of it that is completely transferable from either side of, any other side of the business. If you, like for Aaron's example, in sales on the team side, if you're good at selling, paper, like to use like the office example, like that's helpful. Like it doesn't matter that you've sold for a team. If you're good at sales, I want to hire you to sell because there's something transferable. So don't get hung up on media or entertainment or sports experience.
Just to piggyback off of that very quickly, because I know we're running out of time and there are a ton of questions, but companies are always looking for well-rounded individuals. So what have you done during this time? I always find it fascinating when a student has maybe volunteered somewhere. You can volunteer via the internet now at a ton of places at a cause that speaks to them, et cetera. Volunteerism is a huge component of the NFL. We're really looking for well-rounded people as well. So don't be afraid to also kind of work on what interests you outside of, looking for a job, because sometimes those interests will lead you to the right place.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump into, there's a question from Paul that's pretty similar. Most sports organizations and leagues, they're pretty horizontally integrated. So, at the Cubs, we have a finance team, an accounting team, a marketing team, all those different jobs, an IT team. So just be the best at whatever your area of expertise is. So if you want to work in finance in sports, you may have to go work at a bank in New York City, develop your chops, and then come work for the Cubs. So we have a strategy position where we hire from the banking world. They come and work for the Cubs for a few years, and then they go get their MBA after that, and then hopefully come back and join the program. So it's just about getting that experience. Same thing in marketing or whatever area of expertise you want. So don't worry. It's a tough time in the industry right now. If you can't break in right now, find the best job to keep growing your skill set.
And I'd love to, piggyback off that as well. I think that the other thing I'd say, and I've given this advice to some students already, is especially, if you're not going into the workforce immediately, right? You're not, not necessarily, you didn't just graduate. That's a huge challenge. But if you were, you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, and you're losing your summer opportunity or a fall or winter opportunity because of the state of the world right now, take that as an opportunity in and of itself. I think Robbie, Aaron, Josephine, you guys probably all agree with me. How many opportunities do you get to take a step back and say, you know what, I'm going to work on my passion project, or there's something that I'm really interested in X, Y, Z as it relates to the sports industry. Well, create your own project. I know that's easier said than done, but if you're never going to have the time to do something like that. And, if this, the silver lining is you have more time, take on a challenge like that. You never know where that's going to go. Josephine had kind of hit on that same point. I think that's really important. I'm going to go to a question from Natalie, who says one of her apprehensions in networking in the sports and entertainment industry are just how many different roles there are, and and how many different areas of the industry there is. She says, as an ILR student, I'm interested in the union talent side as well as the marketing branding side. Is there a right or wrong way to go about networking if I'm interested in both?
Just ask the right questions and help people, have people help you decide what's right for you by learning about their experiences. Sorry, Robbie.
No, I was perfect. And Josephine, keep me honest, because you see this a lot more. I'm okay if a candidate says, hey, I think I want to do this, but I also want to do that. I'm not sure. I want to find out more about it so I can be better informed. I'm totally okay with that. You don't have to come to me and say, hey, your job is exactly what I want to do. That's my dream job. Help me get there. Like if you say, hey, I'm interested in this or that, I'd love to pick your brain on this so I can figure out if that's more for me. I mean, right, Josephine? Like I think that there's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's what networking is all about. We're here to help you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one personal example, like I got into CA on the talent side and I'm on the brand side. I didn't realize that my passion and skill set was better for the brand side until I was at CAA and working on the talent side and here networking internally at CAA to find out what my colleagues on the brand side were doing. And once I learned about their business, their side of the business, I was like, you know what? I actually think A, that's really interesting to me, and B, I actually think I'm better equipped for that. And that's where I pivoted, and I've been doing this side of the business for 7 years now.
Yeah, I think, I think that's, that's such an important, perspective. Look, we're people, I think Josephine mentioned that earlier. We're human beings, and we all had our process too. I went through college, 4 years thinking I was either going to go into broadcasting and sports journalism or baseball operations. They're different. And I had a lot of those conversations where I spoke with people and I said, these are my two interests, but you relate to this area of interest. So I want to ask you questions that are relevant to this to understand where I should go. I think it's actually really healthy to have a process like that where you're open to a lot of different areas, because as Robbie mentioned, you might think one thing is the best fit, but then you have your eyes open to something else through a conversation, and then you start chasing that rabbit hole and realize that's better. I know one of the best things for me within my Cornell experience, and this is in part thanks to people like Robbie who brought in great speakers while I was there, it was hearing and going to conferences like this and going to speaker series and hearing different people's experience and what they do and what they work in, because there were I remember freshman year, I walked away and was shocked. There's so much more to the industry than I realized. And it forced me to challenge myself and say, what do I really want to do? Because there's way more out there. So I think having that healthy process gets you to a place when you are making that decision to say, I'm making the right choice. And you're not always going to make the right choice, but it'll get you to a closer, place where you have a better chance of making that decision, the right decision for you. So we're going to go to Sam Schneider has a question. What are all of your biggest regrets from undergrad with regards to networking? Are there missed opportunities, classes you didn't take that would have helped in the future, contacts that you might have lost touch with?
I'll jump in here. I think I look back, I didn't maximize my Cornell education. I came in with 15 AP credits. I took about the minimum amount of classes to graduate, and was worried about having a good GPA, so probably didn't take the harder classes. I think it's challenging yourself as much as possible and then being involved more. So I worked for the football team and I went 100% in on that, but I wish I had been more involved with the Sports Business Society, which started up as, right around my sophomore, junior year. It's be involved and, be engaged. I think when I look at a resume, I want to see the people are involved. They're not just in 5 clubs, but they're the president of a club or they're the treasurer of an organization, things like that. And, I see a question here about, if I'm a freshman, how do I pitch myself? It doesn't matter how little or how much experience you have when you're starting. It's just about being confident and just taking the right, humble, personable approach to people. That's what's important.
Yeah, I think, I'll chime in as well. I think this is maybe not from my time on campus, but maybe still a regret now. Networking is really important, both when you're trying to break in, we touched on this, and later on in your career. I think once you get your first job, it's both wise and a mistake to put your head down and just do a great job at that job. You should do that. But I feel like personally, when I was a junior, senior in college, it was like, relationship building and phone calls all the time. And then I feel like for about 3 or 4 years of my career, I did that within my industry and within very specific circles. As Aaron mentioned, baseball is a very small world, so you kind of get to know everybody. But outside of that circle, I had kind of lost touch with a lot of those relationships that had really helped me to get to this point. And actually the pandemic served as an opportunity. I had a little bit more free time, and everybody did in some ways. And so I reached back out to a lot of those people. There are still people I wish I had kept more of a relationship with over the last few years. So I think not letting those relationships lapse is really important.
Yeah, Alex, I would echo that as I feel like I could have done a better job of maintaining some networking relationships that I wish I did, because now literally I see those people in the industry and I'm like, oh damn, if I was better with him or her, that would actually be really helpful for me right now. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I know we're right at time. I think we've talked a lot about networking. I think we weaved in a good amount of how it's important throughout our careers, but we obviously focused on the initial. But I do want to make sure that we're clear. Networking is important throughout, and someone asked a question on this, throughout your entire career. It's not just about getting the job. Like, the way you're going to excel is by having that network, and having that network in terms of whether it's your next job, deals you could do together, ways you can collaborate, or just being known in the industry and having a positive reputation. So I think networking is so important throughout the entirety, and something that I, especially during the pandemic, I have recommitted myself towards. I've noticed over the last year, 2 years, hopefully not 3, but maybe 3, I've gotten away from doing that as well as I could have. The sports industry is so much like we're at events, we're seeing each other, it's social and whatnot. In the absence of that, I've recommitted to making sure that I digitally network better with my current and maybe some of that networking community that I've lost a little bit, because it's just so important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So we're at time, but we're good to stay on, I think, for a few more minutes to try to answer some of these questions for anybody who wants to remain on. If anyone, Aaron, Josephine, Robbie, if any of you need to drop off, that's okay. But we'll try to take maybe 10 more minutes here to answer a few more of these. because there are some really great questions here. This one's from Jordan, who's ILR class of 24. And he says, first of all, appreciate the time that we all took. So thank you, Jordan, for that. His question is it necessary or how important is it for a candidate to have data analysis or coding experience to work in the sports industry as sports becomes a more analytics-based field?
It doesn't hurt. That's what I'll say is you looked at, right? If you are a class of 2024 and you want to take a class or two, it does not hurt to diversify your experience.
Yeah, I would recommend anything you can do to separate yourself. I wish I had taken classes on Photoshop. I made sure to take a lot of Excel classes to be good at that, but anything you can have. And I would recommend, for those of you who aren't, Teamwork Online is a great site. Any job board you can look at, and just sporadically, once a week, I'm just going to check out job postings and unique qualifications different jobs want, because you may find that job that really wants someone with coding experience, and you might be an incredible fit because no one else has it. But if you're not constantly checking and looking for those opportunities, you might miss it.
With that, I think we'll wrap this up. I just want to thank Josephine, Aaron, Robbie. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and for all of you who chimed in and with questions and who were a part of this panel. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this.